Hello, everybody, and welcome to it's week 5, I believe. Yes, week 5 of the LeanTossup College Football Podcast. My name is Robert Martin, as always, and I'm of course joined by my co-host at BuckMetrics. How are you doing today on this week 5?
I am great. I'm a little better than some of our friends in Austin and Norman right now.
Yes, those were rough, and they were both like relatively late games too. Like that Oklahoma game went really late, and they were they were beat basically the entire game. Like they were kind of coming from behind for most of the entire second half. So yeah, that was not great. We may have been a little bit premature there, talking about. 'Cause I think last week didn't we both pick Oklahoma to make the
Um,
college football playoff, or did I and then you didn't? I think.
y- yeah, I don't remember if I did or not too, but we definitely both had him in our top five.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that was apparently wrong.
I'm not going to overreact to one game though. It's not like they lost to
Mhm.
this year's Iowa State, although they,
No,
they
yeah.
could, but
No, and that's the thing. I think yeah, they probably like physically can't lose to that Iowa State team. But no, it was interesting, right? Because we were both like I didn't play that game actually. I bet what I did bet in that game was I bet Dylan Gabriel over 2.5 passing touchdowns because the model liked it, and that was great. And I was able to shop around nicely. I got that like plus 150. I'm like, that's awesome. We're gonna play that. But I didn't touch it because I think the spread was like 13, and I had the game as like minus 11. So I'm like, I'm not going to touch it. But still, though, shocked that they lost. I didn't lose any money on the game, but still shocked that they lost, though. And that's the thing. But I think in a lot of ways, I think to start the season, we were low on Oklahoma. And then they beat up some, I guess, pretty bad teams. Like, thinking of who they beat, like, they beat Nebraska, obviously. And
yeah, they beat Kent State, who's had not had a fair shake because Kent State's just gone through this, just an absolute just pretend death march.
yeah, if you're the athletic director for Kent State, like, come on this podcast, explain to us what you were trying to do when you scheduled this. Like, I don't know what they were trying to do. They're like, let's just schedule like the toughest teams in the country as a MAC team, and then just see what happens. Like,
I can tell you what they're trying to do. They're trying to pay their bills because they get a lot of money for those.
I guess, yeah. So they start the season at Washington, a contender in the Pac-12, then Oklahoma, then Long Island University. They beat them 63-10. I assume Long Island University is in New York. Then they play Georgia. Like, what are you're playing two teams that could make the college football playoff? Why would you do that? Like, and then they just play a bunch of MAC teams. Actually, literally just the rest of their schedule is MAC teams now. So, but yeah, no, just a crazy schedule there, and yeah, I don't know what they were doing. But yeah, just a murderer's row of things there. But yeah, okay. So I guess that's probably enough about Oklahoma for now, at least. Let's start off with the dashboard. So what just happened? Where are we now? And what happens next?
Yeah. So first, looking at the week that was, basically topics that we talked about last week, and really how did that play out on last Saturday. So we talked about Texas A&M with that odd performance against Miami, where they were great on defense and horrible on offense, both giving up and getting 5.1 yards per play. And how did it turn out? Well, you know, A&M is just impossible to figure out in terms of how they're going to do against the spread because they get all these crazy points. They either covered or they didn't, depending on where you shopped and when you shopped against Arkansas in a really weird game, and they shouldn't have, considering I don't know if those uprights were just a few yards shorter on a regular college field. Supposedly that last field goal would have been good. So in typical A&M fashion, I'm puzzled. Um,
And for many ways too, there's the like on one hand, they got 7 of those points from a goal line fumble where
mhm.
like I think it was literally KJ Jefferson. He tried to reach the ball over the pile into the end zone, and then apparently it didn't go over, and then it got punched out, and then they ran it back a bit, and then the guy was going to get tackled, and then he lateraled it to another guy, and then that guy ran the rest. So that was insane. And then again, yeah, Arkansas shot chance to win the game, missed a field goal. It literally hit the top of the upright, which again, it's very questionable as to like if I like the thing of it is 99 or like 99.9% of the time it doesn't matter. But like I have extreme questions about like if a ball like goes exactly over the middle of the upright, how are like and it's above the upright, how are they ruling that? Like I have no
Yeah.
confidence that they're gonna get that right. So
No, I mean, do you think they're going to call it consistently? You can't even if you look
no.
at pass interference just from game to game
Mhm.
or defensive holding. There's no consistency on that. You think they're going to get that right at all?
Well, I've seen literally like when they're looking at video reviews, it's bad. It's worse in college, less bad in the NFL. But like they have no depth perception, so they're like, oh, here's the line. But like if you're actually figuring out like where that is in
Yeah.
3D space, they're well short of the line. Like oh, you can see they're over the line, but it's because of the angle. Like yeah, no, I have zero faith that if that had actually gone over the upright, they probably just be like yeah, sure, whatever, it's good. But
Yeah. Just let me get out of here.
yeah,
Exactly.
still have no idea. They have no idea how they won that game. They shouldn't have won that game. They
No.
should definitely shouldn't have covered the spread in that game. But yeah, we're fading A&M this week
I
for
don't
sure.
know. At this point, it's just, are we chasing like we're owed money by them? It just
Yeah,
I feel weird, but like they're due. And maybe they're due for a really bad streak of regression, but I don't know.
yeah,
Jimbo's kind of broken the mold here in terms of what numbers mean and how it plays out at the end of the year.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We also talked about the great day that Michael Penix had against Michigan State. We mentioned that the Spartan D is not improving, so they gave up 240 rushing yards and over 10 yards per pass attempt to Minnesota, who was without their best receiver by far, and Minnesota easily covered that game. Reminder in the preseason pod, I said this and it seemed a little far fetched, but I said I could kind of see a situation where Sparty just goes down the elevator shaft, and I think that shaft is kind of just one step ahead of them now.
Yeah, not not a good result. And to be fair, we did call this, right? We called Michigan State as a regression candidate before. We were both on Minnesota. I had money line, should have laid it, but honestly, I don't really care that much. It was basically the same price. So, but yeah, no, it was yeah, that was. And again, we saw this coming a mile away. Like none of us were like, I think Michigan State's competitive in this game. The thing is, it's hard at that point. It's hard to separate it though, right? Because it's like, is Michigan State just bad or is Minnesota actually good? I kind of actually think Minnesota is good, and I'm still really happy I made the. I think I got them like 8-1 to win the Big Ten West, and
Wow. Nice.
every time that like every I feel like every week the Big Ten West just crumbles around them. Like
Yeah, yeah.
they're just like we're just gonna run the ball, and Wisconsin's like yeah we're just gonna get blown out by Ohio State, and like it's just crazy stuff just happens around them, and they're just gonna just keep running the football, and it seems to be working.
I'd like to say they have to stay healthy, but they lost their best receiver. I don't know how long he's out, and still they had a really good game. So they might just cruise in the West.
Yeah, it was
Um, you
34
know,
to 7. That's just
yeah.
that's just a brutal score. Like that just
It's yeah, it's funny. Like I think it closed at like three
yeah it was
or
3.
three and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, one of those early season misprices.
Hmm.
We also mentioned UCLA had been really sloppy with 3 fumbles, 2 interceptions, and a block punt in their first 3 games. They actually had a clean game at Colorado, so maybe they've fixed that. Although I don't know if Colorado does anything to bother anybody too well, so we'll see. But maybe that's behind the Bruins.
So what will it take for the Colorado to fire their head coach? Like, is it just like okay, they just not covering the spread for the rest of the season? Like, is
He got the vote of confidence from the athletic director. Um, I'm wondering kind of how do they not have the money? Just remember after the 2019 season, Michigan State had to buy out Mel Tucker out of his contract at Colorado. Did that money just disappear because Colorado's an underfunded Pac-12 team or program? I don't know. I it's he's not he's almost to the point where he's not making it an easy decision to he's making it a very easy decision if that makes sense.
yeah? At this point, it's just a matter of time. How yeah, maybe there's something with the contract. They're just gonna let him go at the end of the season, or I don't know. But yeah, it's just
Yeah.
not a good situation there at all.
And no, it's really dire. We mentioned that Kansas State was held by Tulane to QB plus of 47, and Tulane had the number 1 pass defense in all of FBS. So kind of like Tulane based on that. Tulane lost to Southern Miss by 3, although they did outgain the Southern Miss by almost 200 yards, which makes me think that was a little fluky. Um, I'm still a believer in Tulane for this season.
I'm a believer in Tulane on Friday night, actually, against
Yeah,
Houston. Yeah, I mean, the thing of it is, again, you got a really good pass defense. Houston's got a pretty good quarterback in Clayton too, and I think that's a good matchup there if they can shut them down. The more I think about it, like we maybe should have seen, and again, I don't think we touched this game at all, but like we probably should have seen that like the Kansas State loss to Tulane was like a look ahead spot for
yeah,
Oklahoma. And then we should have been like, oh, maybe that's why because like one of the reasons why I didn't play Kansas State against Oklahoma was like, ah, well, they just lost to Tulane, the Green Wave. Do we really want to bet on the team that lost to the Green Wave? But yeah, no, we should have seen that as a look ahead spot. But oh well.
yeah. The other thing too is Willie Fritz. He actually ran the triple when he was at Georgia Southern, and originally at Tulane. I think he had that too. So he probably knows better than the average bear how to slow down a running quarterback like Martinez. That's one of those things that easier to see now than going into the game, but just kind of put in the back of your mind for next time you see kind of a random matchup like that. That's one of those things where we kind of get an
Mhm.
advantage on the market. Um, so we also noted that Duke getting 8.5, and then it closed, I think, at 7 at Kansas really told us that Duke is for real. And I also cited multiple data points showing that the Duke offense is real. Even though Duke lost at Kansas, Riley Leonard threw for 9.3 yards per attempt, which is very impressive. So I'm still believing in the Duke offense. And as long as Elko is there, I think that that defense will always have a chance.
Yeah, I mean, no, like we all like Kansas, but we don't like Kansas. It's not because of Kansas's defense. We're not like, man, that's a
Yeah.
good defense right there. We're like, man, Jalen Daniels is awesome. We're like the defense. There are people on the field playing defense, but we're like, man, Jalen Daniels is really good though, and like, I mean, he actually is really good. Like
Yeah.
he's done some like, and again, like last week I got this, and I'm gonna look for it the second it goes live this week too. Jalen Daniels over 1.5 passing touchdowns, like plus 130. Like it's just like that was free. That was the first quarter, I think. Like
Yeah.
it's just like he's passing the ball, he's running, he's just awesome. And you know what? Like I think he's not. I think he's still like a. He's either like a sophomore or a junior. I think he's still a couple years out from the NFL. But like, I would not be surprised if like I don't think it's this year, but I would not be surprised if he starts getting some NFL buzz soon. Like buzz like for next year. Like he looks really good, and like he's a good running quarterback that's
Yeah.
accurate. Like that's the prototype a lot of NFL teams really like, and they never have enough quarterbacks in the NFL. So I could see him getting some draft buzz in the next year or so, like for next
He
year.
he seems to me like he might be a year away from being a lesser version of Lamar Jackson. He's
Yeah.
just got that same kind of skill set where he's not the thickest guy, but man, he can just he's fast and he can like make people miss too.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. We also mentioned that San Diego State opening a dog and closing a dog to Toledo showed that they're in serious trouble. Um, yeah, they pulled that game out, but I think they're still in serious trouble. And I think the difference in that was just Jason Candle again just worked some of his Jason Candle, Pat Narduzzi of the Mac Magic, and found a way to lose a close game. I saw some stat where he's like something like 4-12 in games decided by 3 points or less.
Mm.
So yeah, but San Diego State, I think that they're looking at maybe 6 wins at the best this season.
I mean, we do have that under, but the thing is, they guess who they play this week? They play Boise, which is like potentially, and they're like 6 point dogs to Boise.
Yeah.
That's really tempting. Like I don't believe in San Diego State, but I believe way less in Boise. So
No. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
so
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. TCU at SMU, just the fact that SMU opened a favorite, they actually closed a dog, and that total was at 68. Told me the SMU offense is for real. SMU didn't win, but they were still solid versus TCU, and I still think they're a threat in the American. They've lost, by one score to each of Maryland and TCU, two Power Five teams. They've got that good schedule. I think they're one of my games to play later, but so we'll get into more of that a little later. But I still believe in their offense for sure.
Yeah, they're really good. I mean, again, yeah, it's back to back weeks, back to back one loss, one score losses against two teams from Power Five conferences that are actually pretty good, and it's crushing for SMU because they were competitive in all those games, but then they lose both of them by I think a touchdown, or maybe
Hmm.
they lost the TCU game by like 8 points or
I
something
think it was
weird. But
8. Yeah.
yeah, because I think they tried to go for two somewhere. But like again though, like one score games, and like SMU's time is coming. Like yeah, like and weirdly, they've only closed. They've actually like been short dogs, like 3-point dogs, and I haven't played them yet. But like, I'm definitely looking to play them soon. I really like this SMU team.
Yeah, and I think they actually opened as a pick 'em when they were at Maryland too, if I remember.
Yeah.
That says something. Maryland, and maybe there was a little underestimation of Maryland, especially on defense, but that says a lot if you're a group of five team and you're basically pick 'em at a Power Five venue. Um, Maybe a little bit of how what I want to say. There's a little bit more something there than just the final scores have shown in their last couple of games.
Mhm.
Um, Texas at Texas Tech. Texas Tech getting 5 at home was kind of a weird line, and I just pointed out that this was Texas was a soft target, and especially making its first road game in the conference, and then they didn't have their starting QB. You know, as that game was going on, you thought it's not going to happen, but Sark finds a way, and
Mhm.
I mean, it just what can you say? Just that was just right out of the Sark playbook at this point.
Yeah, that has not been the first. There have been so many times that this has happened where Texas will go up multiple scores in like the third quarter
Hmm.
against a team, and then they will lose the game. And I don't like how like this team is
It's
supposed to be
it's
getting
uncanny.
yeah, this team is supposed to be getting better. And like honestly, like um this week not West Virginia is getting 9.5. And honestly, you shouldn't play that. Just wait until the third quarter, and then West
Yeah.
Virginia's gonna be like +20, and then take that and the money line, and then they'll win. So
Yep.
just do that. Like I can't I don't understand how this keeps happening, honestly. Yeah.
Well, part of it is, Sark is a good offensive mind, and when he's in his first 15 script, it looks great. But it's just like after that, it's just like it's his first game coaching ever, every time. It's a weird Groundhog Day thing. Um, so maybe it's just as simple as that, where just once he has to get off the script, he just puckers. I don't know, but
Actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, that 2020 Alabama team they did have some people come back on them. Now at that point then they were just good enough and they had enough like literally NFL players that they could just keep scoring more points.
hmm
But yeah, like they did let a couple teams back into those games. Actually, that'd be on defense. But like, yeah, their offense did kind of peter off towards the end of the game. So yeah, that could be a consistent trend that we're seeing now. Yeah, once they get
yeah,
off of the initial and like and once they make adjustments for it, right? Like, oh, once you're figuring out what Sark's doing, then you just figure it out and can't
yeah,
counter it.
yeah. Boy, this next one, oh, was this prescient. So I pointed out when Boise State hosted Tennessee Martin, they only got 4.5 yards per play on offense. And man, I loved watching that UTEP game because we're once again a UTEP football podcast.
Yes.
They won by I think 17 points. That wasn't even close.
No.
And Boise State actually fired their offensive coordinator on Sunday.
Yes.
So
And I think they've also their quarterback has now said he's going to the transfer portal. Brockmeister.
yeah, Hank Bachmeyer.
Hank
Yeah,
Bachmeier, yeah.
yeah. So it's a clean sweep.
Brock
And
Brockmeister.
yes,
Yeah. No, yeah, he says he's a transfer, which is crazy to do that like mid-season. Um but like that makes me a little like yeah, this is why like Boise State -6 over San Diego State.
yeah.
I
What does that say about San Diego State? It's like, okay, you're playing a team that just lost to UTEP by 17
and
points.
they were 16-point favorites. Like that's a complete flip of the line. Like
Yeah.
how do you do that? Like how do you not play Sandy? Like it's probably a trap, but like who's there? Like okay, so who's the new offensive coordinator? Just like some guy. It's like all
Do you
right,
know? Oh,
I
this
don't know.
is great. Do you
Like
not know her? Dirk, you're more of a NFL guy. Do you remember
yeah,
the name Dirk Cutter?
no, I don't think so.
He was a longtime offensive coordinator in the NFL. I think he was a head coach for maybe one season in Tampa Bay.
That's
I'm not an
that's
NFL guy.
that's those guys are usually very successful. Yeah, one
And
season. They're one season head coach is very successful.
he was actually the head coach at Boise State in the late 90s.
Oh, okay.
And so now they brought him back as offensive coordinator. And I guess that went over so well where the quarterback just said, yeah, not interested.
Yeah, that's not a good
So,
sign. So
no,
yeah, we might be fading Boise this week. Yeah,
with what and backing Brady Hoke, I think this is just a good game to drink beers and laugh at.
that's true.
Um,
That could work. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, happy for UTEP. The over is still alive.
yes.
Um, Mountain West one, maybe rip that ticket out. But the bigger ticket, the season win total over, that one is still alive. So yay for
Yep,
that. Charlotte this week, big game, hinge
it
game for
is.
the season win total against Charlotte.
It definitely is. I spent a good amount of time just going into all offensive problems that Notre Dame has, and they covered easily at North Carolina.
Yeah, no idea what happened in this game at all. I was watching this game and I was just like, oh, Notre Dame scored, that's fine. And then North Carolina will come back, and then Notre Dame just kept scoring. I'm like, what's
Yeah,
happening?
somebody made an interesting point. I don't remember which pod I heard it on, but somebody said um, that North Carolina offense, they basically are just shooting a bazooka every play, just trying for something deep, and it's just a really spread you out offense. And the first team defense is not seeing a tight end at all in anything at all, except for against maybe the scout team, which is not even close to, live bullets. So the first time they're seeing a tight end that can do anything is really in live action. And I think they're just having a hard time seeing teams that are just anything that are close to conventional. That seems pretty reasonable to me because, the defensive coordinator right now, he's pretty legitimate, Gene Chizik. And man, I he's got his hands full. I'll just say that.
Yeah. I don't know if that was more of an indictment of Notre Dame or more of like, I don't know if this is like North Carolina being bad or Notre Dame actually figuring out what they are doing. And I think maybe it's more North Carolina being bad.
Yeah.
Like, the ACC is just a mess. I is Clemson just gonna, like, I don't think Clemson is gonna be just the only remaining team, but like, it'd be really sad if Clemson's just all that's like the last one standing, and it's like, yeah, they're undefeated, but like they're horrific, and then they just get absolutely destroyed by Georgia in the CFP.
Yeah, we've kind of fished around this for a while about saying the ACC is wide open and who's it's going to be. I might do a deeper dive on that next week. I can just I'll have an interesting stat later when I do the USC update. I
Hmm.
think I think they're mentioned in there about who might be the ACC team that we missed on, and I don't think anybody could have seen it coming.
Hmm.
Um, Louisiana, I mentioned in their 21 to 33 loss to Rice, they had just 175 yards on 43 plays for barely 4 per play, and they were 3 of 13 on the late downs. And they followed that up with the loss to Louisiana Monroe, which I don't think anybody saw. I've been skeptical on Louisiana. I did not see that coming at all. And I just think that, you know, it's pretty much, I think it's fair to say that any kind of residue from the Billy Napier regime has got to be gone by now. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just there's nothing there that they can kind of hang their hat on from prior season.
And one good point about that is that when a coach leaves a team and then they immediately start sucking, it's like, okay, maybe that guy was the thing that was keeping them
Yeah.
together, right? Like like same thing as Lance Leopold in Buffalo, right? Buffalo has sucked, and like I think they're starting to come back now a little bit, but like when a good coach leaves a bad, like when a coach leaves a bad team and then that team starts suddenly become, like, when they leave a team that's overperformed and then they suddenly just drop off a cliff, that means that the coach was good. But if like, and there's probably other examples. There's probably an example of this somewhere, like when a coach leaves a team and then the team still keeps performing at that level. Then I think generally that coach has turned out to be bad. I can't really think of an example of a school losing their coach and then continuing that level. But yeah, that's actually a really good, like, weirdly that's a like a bullish sign for Florida. If you're a Florida fan,
Yep.
this is a good thing.
Yep. I agree. And Napier actually, I think he took like 3 or 4 guys with him to Florida too, which
Hmm.
I'm sure hurt as well. Tennessee giving 11 to Florida. We split on that. You were correct. I was wrong. Anything on that now, or you want to?
I'll think we'll talk about that game later.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think we've got some scheduled later. They'll be a little little deeper.
yeah.
Couple of BBMI points. The brand-based market inertia. UNLV opening -3. I think they closed 3 at Utah State. I just said that the market's not getting either of these teams. There's still inertia built into what Utah State did last year and UNLV, what they've done for like the last 50 years.
Yeah.
UNLV wins by 10, and UNLV, that's their 3rd win.
Yeah. We're getting there.
We are.
The thing about Utah State though, and you could have seen this coming a mile away, because week one, or actually sorry, week zero, I think it was week zero.
Yeah.
They played UConn, and then they were
Yep.
like 25-point favorites in the game, and then they like beat them by like 10 or so.
They
And
were
everybody,
trailing early.
yeah, they were trailing early. I think they beat them by like 10 or maybe 14 or some small, like definitely not 25. And my first thought was, okay, Utah State is bad. And then they immediately got obliterated by Alabama. And I think people have been really slow to react to that because like I think people were like, oh well, maybe UConn's good this year, and I think I bet you I bet Syracuse against UConn they covered easily. Like if that if like if a team that's supposed to be bad like plays a good team close early in the year, it probably means that the team you think is good is bad, and this is a perfect example of it, right? And that market still hasn't fully priced that in. Now this week though, Utah State is getting 24 at at BYU. So I think the market has priced it in now.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but yes, I mean maybe we'll see another line somewhere. But like I'm not that game's that's probably too many points for me to touch. And also there's a Thursday football game, so I'm not touching that one. But yeah, no, it's sorry.
Bless you.
Thank you. Sometimes with like sometimes if you're quick to react to lines like that, it's yeah you can figure out like where there's value like that. And that -3 was great value right there. 1 by 10.
Yeah, and just another thing on Utah State, just reminder that in the preseason pod I mentioned that both K Ford and I had Utah State as like extremely lucky last year and just prime for regression. So that's truly borne out.
Yeah.
The other BBMI, I mentioned that Wisconsin and Ohio State was another one where the market was just not getting just the disparity between these two teams. And also that the total seemed low, just giving too much credit to the Wisconsin defense. And Ohio State wins by 31. They almost covered the total by themselves. And we talked about Wisconsin, and I took the under. I think it was 9, which looks almost comedic now in terms of
Yeah.
9 total season wins because they they have not looked like a 9-win team so far.
No, and I was wrong on this game. I'll take the L on this game. I'll talk a bit more about Ohio State later, but like man, just like a pathetic offensive performance by Wisconsin. Like I mean,
Yeah.
you're looking at the fact that like I think somewhere in here I think Toledo or no, yeah, Toledo scored the same. They scored the same amount of points against Ohio State that Toledo did. That's not good. That is
Yeah.
not a good number. So, yeah, not we'll talk more about this game later, but yeah, I'm not a fan of this Wisconsin the effort Wisconsin put out on Saturday there.
Yeah. All right. Also pointed out on a couple of my metrics that I had the Western Michigan quarterback as the fourth worst. His name Jack Sapalek, and not to pick on the poor guy since he's stuck in a bad situation. And also Grant Wells of Virginia Tech as the second worst. And Sapalek, he didn't play, but that Western Michigan offense, basically geared by people, I guess, that he had beaten out for the job. They passed for 71 yards against San Jose State, and they did not come close to covering. Grant Wells was just awesome. He was 16 to 35 for less than 200 yards, threw a pretty bad INT, and man, he just loves to throw it to the wrong team. He did that last year, and he gets to do a lot more this year, the ACC.
Yeah, that was yeah, he was pretty bad last year and yeah, this Western Michigan team is not particularly good this year at all. So, yeah, yeah, they got just obliterated by San Jose State, which is also not a particularly amazing team either. But yeah, so this is the thing, right? With the transfer portal, now we're seeing guys move to different schools, and like now we get to fade them multiple years. Like before they'd be like benched, but now like no, we get to to play against you again. So yeah,
Exactly. Um, and then going over my top wide receivers, I had Keelan Stokes and Juan Carlos Santana, both of Tulsa, number 3 and number 6 overall in all of FBS. And what's interesting is even though Davis Brin, who's been a great quarterback this season, got hurt at Ole Miss, um, that kind of hurt the passing game. But then they ran for 260 yards and over 6 per carry at Ole Miss, who I think's had a pretty decent defense this season. So something's really kind of fit into place there in the offense at Tulsa. I'm definitely going to keep my eye on that. I don't think I've got him this week, but definitely keeping that in the back of my mind for future games. All right, and moving on to informing the narrative. These are games and events that either confirm or about narratives that we already had coming into the week. Um, I look at Arizona State, and yeah, it's going to be extremely shaky in the first game without Herm, but man, are we just going to see for the rest of the season what we've seen over the last 2 weeks? They're 1-3 so far. Um, do you have them over or under 2.5 wins for the season? And they're at Colorado, um, just for some reference on their schedule.
Yeah, it's not good. I saw some of that game there on and at the end they were one of the late games, I believe,
Yeah,
and that was not good. I mean, this is the thing, right? Like I think they're like massive dogs this week, I think. Late too, I
they
think.
play USC.
Yeah, USC 26 points. It's like they should cover that number,
Hmm?
but like that's a lot of points. Like at what point does Caleb Williams just get bored, right? And be like, all right, that's enough. Like at what point do you just pull Caleb Williams? Like, but maybe not 26, maybe like 28 or something. But like they should cover that number, but like I don't think they will. Like that's the thing. I don't even want to try that. Like now we're just getting ridiculous numbers, and even the Stanford one too. Like Stanford wasn't good either. Like 17. Like this is the thing. So, but yeah, like this could be really bad. Like they're definitely not making a bowl, and
Oh no.
definitely not. And yeah, it's not gonna be fun to watch Arizona State football for the rest of the season.
Do you think they win more than one more game this season? I can't see it.
What is their schedule here? Um, I'm trying to find their game here. I can't seem to find their game. Uh, yeah, they're not in the rank. They're not. I can't click on rankings to find
No.
Arizona State. Let's see here. Okay. So obviously USC, Washington, Stanford, Colorado, UCLA. Oh, it's all Pac-12 stuff. Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean maybe they like Colorado at they're at Colorado Saturday, October
Uh-huh.
29th.
That's a
That's
coin flip at this point, right?
That's a barn burner. That's gonna be a great game. I think Colorado wins that game though, but I don't know. Like
Wow.
that's still a couple weeks away. That's gonna be a hell of a game though. That's
That game
this.
should actually be at Rutgers on a Friday night. It's that quality.
Yeah, it should be a Friday. Like that should be like you want everybody watching that game. If that's not packed, that game should be packed over dark. If it's not packed, if that game's like 3:30 in the afternoon, we're being robbed. As like a collective fan base, we're being robbed of this amazing football game. So that should be 10:30 at night. Let's go. Two of the worst teams in the league and the Pac-12. Yeah, that's because their only win right now is against Northern Arizona.
Yeah.
I guess I'm
FCS
assuming
team.
a D2 team. Yeah,
Yeah.
FCS. So yeah, not good, not good, and really bad. So yeah, I expect some interesting things to happen. So yeah, that would be a fun game. But yeah, no, I would like they can win that game, but like yeah, they're gonna go under 2.5 this
Yeah,
season
okay.
probably.
Yeah. Agree. And then Northwestern, they followed their loss to Southern Illinois with a loss to Miami of Ohio, who, as I mentioned, is without their starting quarterback still, and who only gained 4.4 yards per play, but yet Northwestern found a way to lose that game at home.
Yeah, that
I
was
mean,
I played Miami Ohio on that game.
that's right, you
Yeah,
did.
I did
Yeah.
have them. I had them +7 in money line, so I was very happy. I didn't need the 7. But no, yeah, yeah, it's bad, and we called this too, right? Because Duke beat them at like now it makes more sense that Duke beat them pretty handily because like that makes a like remember we got Duke +10 against
Yeah.
this Northwestern team, and like no one's getting no one's getting +10 against. Well, maybe I don't know. Maybe they play a D2
Ooh,
team somewhere.
no. Now it's just Big Ten the rest of the
Oh
way.
yeah, now it'd be just Big Ten. So yeah, I mean, is there?
I don't think they'd be giving 10 to any MAC teams at
I
this
was
point.
I was gonna say Nebraska, but they already played and beat Nebraska.
Yeah.
That was their win. Uh, I don't know. Maybe they play like Rutgers or something. Maybe. Oh God, could they beat Rutgers?
They're not gonna score that much, or they can give 10 points to 10 points to Rutgers. Oh, that's the thing.
That is true. Yeah, no, it's also a really bad situation. Yeah, I yeah, it's not good for Northwestern. And again, everybody, I think this is the thing, right? Because we talked about early in the season, right? It's the same thing, right? If a team you think is good plays a team you think is bad, and it's a close game, it means that the team you think is good is bad, right? And I think we saw Northwestern take down Nebraska, and we're like, well, Nebraska's a good team. Is Northwestern good this year? And the answer to that was a definitive no. And the answer to that was actually no. Nebraska is just even worse than you think. And that's the thing, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
they so I think. No. This weekend they play Penn State, so good luck.
Oh,
Then they play Wisconsin,
no.
Maryland, Iowa, Ohio State, Minnesota, Purdue, and Illinois. So they don't get Rutgers, so they don't get that win. I don't know. I don't want to. No, I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna touch Wisconsin at Rutgers. At
No.
Northwestern.
It
That's
just
horrible.
those teams have problems, but
They do play Iowa though. Oh my God. Can they
uh
actually? No. Oh my God. That's gonna be 3 o'clock. That 29th. Oh my God. There's gonna be so many great games. That could be Arizona State's in North. That's their day. They're circling the day in the calendar. Saturday, October 29th.
Mhm.
All right. That's gonna be some good games on that. The last week of October. That's gonna be some
Yes.
fun games.
Halloween Eve.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay, market intelligence. So this is what I kind of picked up looking at the opening lines from Circa on Sunday morning. UTSA giving 7 at Middle Tennessee State, who just trucked Miami. That is just an awesome context for that Miami loss at home.
Yeah, that game was insane. And we're talking a bit more about that game later, right? Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, we'll talk more about that game later. So I'll save my because I watched that game and it's entire. I watched most of the game in its glory. So we'll talk more about that game. But man, Middle Tennessee State, man, that's so. One, they lost to James Madison as 5-point favorites. They beat Colorado State as 12-point dogs, and now they beat Miami as 25 or 26-point dogs. I
Yeah.
don't remember which one it was. To be honest, doesn't really matter. It's a 25 or a 26-point dog. Crazy season. Yeah, I don't know. I don't love it against UTSA. I'm not touching it, but
Mm-mm.
this I guess it's down to 4 now. 7 I take, but 4 no. And yeah, just fascinating team, fascinating season. We might see them in a bowl game, and I think they beat someone in a bowl last year too. It was like 20-point dogs. So yeah,
They and just a reminder, I think they got less than 150 yards against James Madison too. So it
yeah.
wasn't like they just came close. I
Hmm.
mean, they got outgained by like 350 yards in that game, but they just lit up Miami. Unbelievable. Maryland opened up only giving 4 to Michigan State, and I don't know if there's still just disbelief, or I don't know if I know Tolia was injured in the Maryland game, and I don't know if there were some concerns about him maybe being out. I think that game's up to 7 now or
It's
so.
7, yeah. So I
Yeah.
suspect he's playing. This was insane. This I got this game on a look ahead line at Maryland plus 3.5. Like Maryland plus 3.5. It's now Maryland minus 7. I feel like I have to buy back in at Michigan State now. Like I actually like
Really?
I, well, like
You
how
kind of feel obligated, but yeah.
crazy arbitrage opportunity, right? Like how often do you get that where you get plus a score on both sides? Like I feel like I have to, but like maybe not. Just ride with the Maryland plus 3. But like yeah, no, I don't love Maryland more than 7. I actually kind of think Michigan can cover that, but yeah, like it's yeah, and this is the thing, right? I think we talked about this game. This was a game that I had picked last week, and the Michigan versus Maryland, and I said like this is Michigan's first test. I don't completely believe in this team,
Hmm.
and sure enough, they only beat Maryland by a score, and weird stuff happened in some of those plays that Maryland could have actually won that game.
Yeah.
So
I think
like
Maryland was leading pretty close to halftime.
something like that, yeah, it was like close or tied or something like Maryland could have won that game, and like I and the thing is again though, like this is why like I still have this Michigan State at Maryland game somewhat close. But again, the bet last week was more against Michigan rather than on Maryland. To on
Hmm.
Maryland to an extent because I think Maryland is okay. But yeah, like now this is the fact of like, okay, now you have evidence that Michigan is coming to earth. How are you going to use that in the future? And we'll talk more about a Michigan game later, but uh, sneak preview for part 2 of the podcast. But no, this is the thing, right? So take from that as maybe Michigan isn't as good as people think it is. Uh, don't ignore that because again, then now watch this game, right? Because if Maryland doesn't blow out Michigan State here, then immediately look to Michigan and be like, oh, okay, maybe Michigan isn't actually that good this year. Maybe people massively overreacted to last season. But again, their schedule is so easy, you have to like find these ready-made slots to actually figure out if they're actually good or not. So
Hmm. Yeah. The other quarterback related instance, Charlotte opened up getting 3 at home against UTEP. You know, against South Carolina, Charlotte was actually covering pretty easily against South Carolina. Then Chris Reynolds got hurt, and that just got away from them. They couldn't score anymore. So I'm thinking that he's got to be out again. I haven't even checked the news, but that's what that line tells me. And I think UTEP is still given 3, or is that even up more now?
I believe it's 3. Last time I saw it, it was 3. But yeah, I'm a little iffy on it. My model doesn't really love a play either way.
Yeah,
But yeah, I could see. I don't know. I'm not betting it because this is one of the games we need UTEP to win to hit their season total over. Yeah, it's UTEP
yeah.
-3. So I'm not touching it. I'll be interested in the result of this game though. But yeah, if this helps us get to our win total over, I'm good with it.
Yep, yeah, enough just emotional equity in this one without having to put any more money on it. San Diego State, getting 6 at Boise. We've kind of made fun of them twice already. We
Yeah,
don't need to do that again.
I think you've got to I think you've got to play something on San Diego State. Like you're getting plus 210 on the money line. Like yeah, it's not as good as last week when you're getting like 8-1 on the money line again with UTEP against Boise, but like if this program is like disintegrating and like San Diego State is not good, but I think this is again we're not betting on San Diego State, we're betting against Boise, right? And I think that's more or less what we're doing here. So I'm
Well,
gonna take that. Not a big bet. It's a Friday night, but like it's a Friday night. We got nothing, there's no college. There's no NFL. Yeah. Let's do some college football here.
okay. I said I wasn't gonna make fun of San Diego State. Um, I am gonna make fun of you for betting on Brady Hoke though, especially if this doesn't win. So
That's
be
that's fair.
warned.
That's fair. All right, I'll take that. I'll take that. If it loses, but we'll see.
Okay. And then FIU is getting 14 at New Mexico State. FIU is definitely bottom 3 in all of FBS, and they're just in that those bottom 3 are in a special category. This just really just quantifies just how dire they are. New Mexico State, I'm a big Jerry Kill fan, but it's been a rough first year, and the fact that they're giving 2 touchdowns to anybody in the FBS says scores about where FIU is at this point.
Yeah, not good. Not a good sign. It's New Mexico State is pretty bad.
Yep. Um, so my brand based market inertia plays for or notes for this week. I had one, and then my model kind of contradicted me, so I'm just gonna put that in my back pocket for now, and we'll talk about it in part 2 this week. Um, Duke opened one, and the total is 53 and a half, hosting Virginia. I think that's up to 2 now. Does that sound right?
It's 2 now. Yeah, maybe two and a
Yeah.
half. I'll check.
And I'm thinking that just still shows doubts that the market has about the Duke offense, which is just crazy at this point. I mean, you know, I don't think Virginia is any kind of great defense. I just don't know how we see that an even game with the total below average for an FBS game.
Yeah, didn't I can't remember who did West Virginia play? Did they play Virginia or West Virginia last week? Or no, West
West
Virginia.
Virginia played Virginia Tech. Virginia played Syracuse.
Oh yeah. So that maybe they think that like Syracuse is good. So then if they played them close, but I don't know. I've
But
taken
this the
Duke.
total should be higher than. That's what I don't get is
Yeah, that is true. Like I don't.
Virginia is going to slow down Duke's really good passing game. I think they're missing the whole thing about the Duke passing game. The market is.
Yeah, I mean, like, um, Syracuse got yards. Like it wasn't like they weren't moving the ball. They just kicked like 4 field goals instead of like if those were touchdowns. It's a completely different story, right? It's Duke minus like 8.5, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's the thing. So I don't know.
Yep.
I've taken Duke minus 2.5. I believe in Duke. So
Yeah, as have I. And then this line's moved since the open. South Alabama opened at circa giving only 5 at Louisiana. It's up to 9, which is more in line. I think that there's still a disbelief in just how quickly Louisiana has fallen, and I think there's a lot of gravity from last year on the South Alabama lines, and maybe it's getting a little freed up now. The fact that this has gone up to 9, but you just look objectively, this game shouldn't be close, and maybe Louisiana has some sneaky home field advantage at the home of the Cajuns in Lafayette, but I think that the market's missing both sides of this equation.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Then to my metrics, my top QB plus, just some names that stood out to me. Tanner Morgan at Minnesota, ninth overall. Interesting because Minnesota's really been more of a running team. Now, this is an efficiency and explosive measure, not just a raw yardage measure, but you don't get to be this high unless you're throwing for a really good average per attempt and you're not throwing the ball to the other side. So really interesting just how much he's come back under Kirk Shiraka, who was their OC in 2019. Jordan Travis at Florida State, 10th. Number one, it's good to see he's healthy because he had a scary injury the week before, and in the top 10 under Alex Atkins running the offense, it's been very promising. And then 16th, Garrett Schrader of Syracuse. Man, from where he was last year, this is impressive. And we'll have more of that in part two. Looking at the bottom, so 13th from the bottom is TJ McMahon for Rice. Um, he's a backup, and he's that guy that threw, I think, 4 interceptions against USC. I just bring this up because Rice pretty much should have beaten Houston. Um, I think that Houston is just bad at this point. I don't know if you agree with that, but
No, I actually completely agree with you. I think Houston is bad. I think they're one of the, I mean, not the worst teams in the league, but I think they're just bad, right? Like, I think because they lost to Kansas, almost lost to
UTSA,
UTSA,
yeah, that was in
lost.
overtime.
Yeah, they did lose to Texas Tech, and yeah, just a very uninspiring team right now at this point. Yeah, like I just don't think this Houston team is good, and
Mm-mm.
yeah, I I don't. I actually really liked them last year, and I thought this was a decent team. But for some reason, I don't know what it is. This year, they've just had a lot of problems this year.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is before I really started digging into this season and started the preseason analysis, I kind of had them mentally pegged as like one of the best group of five teams. And then, I'm going through and there was really nothing. How do I say this? They had pretty low improvement metrics on defense and the offensive line. So I didn't think there was going to be a huge step forward. And basically, this is another team where K Ford and I both had them as extremely lucky by 2 games last year. So I thought they could be the same team as last year and just have like maybe an 8 or even 7 win season. And so that might be what we're seeing is just, they had some weird things that just didn't replicate this season. So interesting. Keep an eye on Houston to fade in the future. Ninth from the bottom, Tyler Van Dyke of Miami, who got pulled against Middle Tennessee State. Boy, Miami's been all over the place so far in this part one. More to come on that. Six from the bottom, Donovan Smith of Texas Tech. Just pointing this out because even though he's six from the bottom, they still beat Texas with, if you just have the classic, and again, I saw this at USC, there would be like maybe 2 guys on opposing teams that would beat Sark's team that could start for USC. And that's exactly what we had, with Texas Tech. I don't think anybody, maybe one guy would start for Texas that's on Texas Tech's team. And they have, a QB that's like six from last in FBS and QB plus, and you lose to that guy. He finds a way. It's amazing. We don't need to revisit that, but another data point just to make the same angry part on my on my viewpoint. Fourth from the bottom is Brennan Armstrong from Virginia, who was just awesome last season. And this is interesting because he was so good, and this ties into, a deeper dive we have in part two. And then second from the bottom is Phil Jerkovic of Boston College. Just a reminder, he was actually recruited by Notre Dame. He transferred. He was in Boston College in 2020 when they had that pretty good first year under Jeff Hafley. So Boston College has a new offensive coordinator. He's a former Notre Dame tight end coach, and it's just clearly not working out. Their defense is just horrible. So, some good data points here in terms of who to, bet on or against. And that Jerkovic angle was just awesome for the Florida State game. That was not even competitive. 17, I think, grabbed some people as like a large spread. And, you know, it seemed like 10 minutes in, Florida State was going to cover that with ease.
Yeah, I had that game as one of the ones on my like Hexabox, and then I just turned it off. I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I think like it was like I'm like there's better games to watch. I'm done with this game because I had won. I'm like it's over. It's just wrap it up. Don't need to watch this game anymore. It's over.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, and again, Boston College again. this week, still only like again, I've been fading Boston College the last couple of weeks, been very profitable, so we're just gonna keep that train going. Yeah.
Yeah. My top receivers. First, again, Ollie Jennings, the third of Old Dominion. If you've seen them, he's like the only guy that they have, and it's just amazing that like the only kind of talent they have can still manage to get open and be that productive when that's the only guy you basically have to defend. I don't know what his eligibility is, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's an underclassman if he winds up at a different school next year, unless they completely turn it around. Three, my buddy Tyron Smith of UTEP, back towards the top. The UTEP magic of Dana Dimmel. Then I've got a couple of pairs here. Number 4 and 6 are Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. of Ohio State. Pretty scary when you've got two receivers that are that high, and especially when one of them is not Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's on your team. My gosh, I think we saw what's going to happen with all three of these guys on the field at the same time against Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Um, and I think you're going to talk about Ohio State in part two, right?
Yeah. And this is the thing, right? It's like this is why you shouldn't have been like I think people were really scared of like Ohio State last year going into the Rose Bowl because Chris Olave and
Garrett Haskell,
Garrett
Garrett
Wilson,
Wilson. Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
both sat because of the draft. And like I think we're getting to a point now where some of these schools they will always have another first round wide receiver
Yeah.
just sitting there. And like Ohio State and Alabama and maybe to some extent Texas, like we're getting to a point now, and they're starting to talk about this in the NFL, and you're seeing this filter out into into college. There are just this glut of really good wide receivers. We've kind of in some ways solved this wide receiver position. We know what makes a good wide receiver, and we're now identifying them as a lot better. Statistically, we're able to identify a really good wide receiver a lot easier now than we were before, and as such, now we're able to find these guys a lot faster and develop them into good talent, and then get that talent to the NFL a lot faster now. So like right now, you're seeing wide receivers get 20 million a year. That might come down in the future because you're just gonna have this massive glut of really good wide receivers, which will help the game, right? Like if you have better
Yeah.
wide receivers, you're gonna get more points scored, and it's this is kind of an analytics success story that we're seeing so many good wide receivers, and the fact that a team like Ohio State can just they just have more of these guys, and like how many more do they have down the pipe, right? Like this is
Yeah.
the ones they have now. They're like at some kid's high school right now, and that kid's gonna be the next number one wide receiver too. Like this is how crazy this is.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. It's especially with Ohio State. It's just scary. Another pair, Tyler Scott and Trey Tucker, both of Cincinnati. I bring this up because one of the most important things that we do on this podcast is mention things that make me look smart. And before the season, I mentioned that Cincinnati is going to be surprising on offense because they returned a lot of pieces, even though they lost Ritter. The offensive line basically can make it easy for somebody that knows what they're doing to be successful, and you're seeing that here with two wide receivers in the top 40. Um, Two other programs with two in the top 40. This is pretty interesting. Charlotte, and that makes sense with Chris Reynolds and how good he is, and plus how much they basically are giving up like 50 points a game and they have to throw it all the time. And then Georgia State, who's got a good quarterback, and they've given up a good number of points. And I think also just facing North Carolina probably hurt or helps that quite a bit too.
Yeah. One thing I will say about Cincinnati though is that like that team is a really good passing attack. Like they are really good, and their quarterback he hasn't gotten much hype yet, but I've kind of picked up on him being like a really good passing threat. And like I bet them against Indiana, and they covered that game relatively easily. Indiana did get it back, and then they needed kind of a backdoor cover, I guess. Like they just scored another touchdown to make it to 21, but like they were dominant that entire game. Like Indiana made a bit of a comeback. Now Indiana isn't that great, but at the same point in time, Cincinnati they're actually really good. I thought there was going to be this massive drop off for them once they lost Desmond Ritter, but like if they can keep their quarterback and they keep their head coach this year, I'm excited to see them in the Big 12 next year. I'm excited to see what they could do. I
Yeah.
want to see them come back from a double digit deficit against Texas. Let's go. Let's see this.
Yeah.
This is yeah, that's gonna be fun.
Yep. All right, so that's all I have on the wide receivers. Time for the USC update. USC pulls out wouldn't say a miracle, but pulls out a tight one at Oregon State by 3. Just to remind the preseason pod, I actually made USC a 2-point favorite. So once again, I'll pat myself on the back because that's what I do best. Caleb Williams was horrible. He just didn't have it except for on that last drive. He went from fourth to 18th in the QB plus ratings, and his rating went from 235 all the way to 144, which is still good, but man, he just did not have it for whatever reason. I think part of it, um, I forget who did the game, but it was Yogi Roth. He made a good point about they kept on changing the picture late and just changing coverages at the last second. And it seems like he's not bothered by pressure, but when he's bothered by a defense that he can't really figure out, he just kind of goes into a shell, man. You can do whatever you want and pressure him. That's one thing, but if he just can't figure it out, he's just not the same guy. And I think that's what we saw in Corvallis. Jordan Addison, I have him still as 11th as one of the most productive receivers in all of FBS. With my first full data set, BuckMetrics for this year, I've got some actual ratings for this team. I have USC as a plus 7.1 on offense, which is 21st in FBS. Um, if we take out the strength of opponent, that moves up to ninth. Um, they had no turnovers again. That's 4 times in 4 games, and that equals as many times as they did it for the last 3 seasons. The pass defense is number 2 in the FBS, all of FBS, trailing only Iowa. I know that the interceptions really skew that number, so if we take that away, they're still 33rd. And what's interesting is they've done that against 3 very good quarterbacks in Tanner McKee, Jake Haener, and Chance Nolan. Chance Nolan, as a reminder, coming into the USC game was 16th in QB plus, and he had a really good last season too. So it's not like they've done it a bunch of against a bunch of tomato cans. Overall, the defense has a rating of plus 7.9, which is 14th overall in FBS. So I had a note here originally that said that it's just not sustainable because so much of the defensive success is skewed by the interceptions, which just aren't going to keep up. And plus, they're 99th in all of FBS in how much they're giving up in yards per rush. And I wanted to look a little deeper in that. So I dug in by game, and this is what's interesting. There's definitely some improvement here. So against Rice, they gave up 4.3 yards per attempt, and Rice's average is 3.7, so that's 0.6 worse. Against Stanford, they gave up 4.9 versus 3.8, so that's over a yard worse, which is horrible. But then against Fresno State, they gave up 5.1, but Fresno State runs for 4.9, so they narrowed that gap quite a bit to 0.2 yards. And then against Oregon State, they actually gave up their average. So they still have a ways to go, but it's getting better on defense, and you can kind of see that. You didn't have just as many of those crazy strings of 7 yards and 7 yards and 7 yards at a time. At least they're mixing in some stops every now and then. This is really interesting. There are only 5 teams of all of FBS that have a rating of 7 or better on both sides of the ball. Interesting group here. Kansas State, which is interesting. Georgia, we would expect. Alabama, we expect. LSU, which is very surprising, and USC. Interesting group. I don't think USC will remain there throughout the season, nor Kansas State, nor LSU, but that's where we are at this moment. What did you say? I think they're up to like a 26 now, giving 26 at versus Arizona
Yeah,
State.
26.
Yeah, and that's higher than the 18 I made in the preseason. I didn't have Herm being fired yet, which I think is the difference. So we'll see. I kind of worry about games, but I'm not worried about this one. I just don't see how Arizona State, poses any threat Saturday.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't. Yeah, I the 26 is a lot of points, and we're getting to the point now where this is disrespectful, right? Like this is like I mean, you're telling me they can't keep it within 3 scores, right? Like this is the thing, right? So I don't know. I just,
I don't think they can.
I mean, I won't touch it, but I could see why. What? Yeah, like we're just. I mean, it's fine, but like we're just at the disrespectful phase now, where they're just like, fine. How low can it go before
Yes.
they start covering a spread, right? Like I don't know. It's fascinating. Like Let's see. Like, how far can it go? They can win by 40. Let's see.
Yeah,
But
could be. My futures bets. So, the one I'm really fired up about this week, Kansas State over 4.5, Big 12 wins. You know, a win at Oklahoma is just enormous in that regard. Then I'm this is kind of becoming a habit. I'm gonna pull two tickets out of the trash bin that I'd thrown in there before. UTEP that over 5.5, beating Boise State at home, brings some life back to that one. And I'm gonna grab the Miami, Ohio to win the MAC just because they have a road win against a Big Ten team in name only in Northwestern. But hey, they did it. So, there's still hope for the Red Hawks.
yeah, first when relegation starts in the Big Ten, Rutgers versus Northwestern, who loses? But no, I mean it is good though, right? Like the thing of it is there is a massive difference between the MAC and the Big Ten, right? Like even in just like the worst player on the Big Ten would be instantly starting, probably almost a starter at the MAC, right? So like there is a huge level, there's a huge difference there between those two conferences, and the fact that you are able to beat it shows that there's something there. Again, MAC is always crazy, right? Like
Yeah.
teams will lose one week, win the next. It's called Maction for a reason, and it exists on weeknights because that's when we love it. So yeah, Maction is going to be fun. Maybe we'll when we get to Maction, we might just like literally like have an entire section of the podcast dedicated to Maction.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
down for that
yeah,
for
actually,
sure.
that's not a great idea. I just thought of that now. Let's do that. Okay, but that we're still a couple weeks from Maction though. But Maction, you gotta love Maction. Just watching games
Absolutely.
on like a Tuesday night at 8 o'clock between
Yep.
two teams scoring like a billion points. It's awesome. So yeah,
In front of like 3,000 people, and it's like 37 degrees outside.
yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah,
All right. We've kind of changed the format of the next one. We just called it the hot seat before, and it's kind of tiresome just to talk every weekend about how bad Jeff Collins is. So, going to change this up a little bit. This is now club hot seat and the arrivals and departures. So, we all know Jeff Collins was ushered out of club hot seat and given a ride back home.
yeah. It was actually I have a funny story about that. So I had one of the specials on my sports book was next head coach fired, and I'm like, okay, you know what? I've bet enough. Like, it was enough head coaches have been fired. I bet it's gonna be Jeff Collins this week. I actually had no inside information. It was 2-1. I'm like, it's his time. And then the thing is, it was actually close because Auburn almost lost to Missouri, and I'm like, oh no, am I gonna lose? Because like they're gonna fire Harsin first, and then like I was looking, and like weirdly enough, like Georgia Tech covered the spread. I'm like, oh no, I'm not gonna cash it this week. But then it was announced that Georgia Tech was having a meeting, and I was like, oh okay, but he's probably gone. But then I didn't even see anything about that until I signed into my sports book the next day, and I was like, oh, why is my account so high? Oh, Jeff Collins must have been fired. And I was like, yeah, that's how. Then I go onto Twitter and like Jeff Collins. I'm like, oh, he got fired. Yeah, okay, that's why I have more money now. So yeah, that was that was fun. But yeah, no, it's yeah the thing of it is, it's for college football and even for the NFL too. It's sometimes so easy to call out when some of these guys are going to be fired. It's not even like you're like, okay, this guy's getting fired, and we all know he's getting fired. He just hasn't been fired yet, right? That's the thing. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So, but the thing is, we've gone through most of our obvious targets, right? Like we all said at the beginning of the season, we all knew Scott Frost was on the hottest seat. Jeff
Yep.
Collins, outside of Harson, he's the last survivor yet so far. But outside of that, most of the obvious targets are gone. So now we're going to go a level deeper. So what are the next level targets here?
So, Andy Avalos has been granted a very nice table in club hot seat. Sark is lingering outside. He's not yet at the door, but he's kind of walking back and forth in that weird, I don't know if I'm going to go in or not thing.
Well, actually, one thing I will say about Sark here is that because this season is now starting to look very eerily similar to last season.
Mm-hmm.
And now, with the exception of Alabama, and that probably bought him a couple of weeks. Like the only reason he's lingering outside is because of that. Like if they didn't cover the spread against Alabama, then he's in club hot seat right now. But like, and that's the thing, right? Because this is the thing, right? Like the last season hallmark was play a good team, get blown out, have big leads in games, lose those games, and then finish under 500, right? And the thing is, like looking at this, like if you look at I had it here. If you look at Texas's schedule so far, outside of that Alabama game, it is not particularly inspiring. They beat UL Monroe 52-10. Good job.
Hmm.
Lost impressively to Alabama, 20-19. Okay. Beat UTSA 41-20. Okay. Well, that was just Bijan Robinson running for 183 yards. So okay, but you did cover the spread. That's fine. Texas Tech, a team that lost to who did they lose to? NC State, but still a relatively good team. They lose that 37-34 in OT off of a fumble. But like now, you get West Virginia this week, who I've already bet that against the spread. You've got Oklahoma in the
Yeah.
Red River next weekend, which I
Mm.
already got this on the look ahead. Oklahoma -2.5.
Oh
Just
boy.
instant. Oh, I'm loving that. Then you've got Iowa State. Okay, you'll probably win that, but we can't even say that, right? Because they lost this game last year to Iowa State, I think. Then you've got Oklahoma State, the most fraudulent ninth-ranked team ever. Then you have Kansas State, which just beat Oklahoma. Then you have TCU, who's legitimately threatening. Then you have a terrifying game against Kansas on November 19th. And then you finish off the season with Baylor. Like, if your wins so far are their two wins are against UL Monroe and UTSA, are they both Sun Belt or
ULM is Sunbelt, and who was the other one?
UTSA?
No, they're USA.
Conference USA. So your
Yeah.
two wins are against Power 5 conferences, and you're starting conference play now.
Yep.
That's not good. That's a
No.
little terrifying. If you're only now again, obviously there are some bad teams in the Big 10 or Big 12, which has 10 teams, but in the Big 12, like there's a couple here, but like it's definitely conceivable to me that they don't make a bowl. And like if they don't make a bowl for two straight, like they always made a bowl with Tom Herman. And you got Archie Manning coming next year.
I think that buys him some time. But I think
I don't know.
he's still on what boulevard is Club Hot Seat on? We'll think about the street. I don't want to screw this up. This is very rich.
We'll have to think of this. We'll have to think of this metaphor deeper.
Yes.
But no, like I like this is the thing. Like this is starting eerily similar to last season because
Yeah.
last season was they were doing okay. Actually, I'll just press the button to call up last season here, right? Beat Louisiana 38 to
Hmm.
13. That's
A
similar.
good Louisiana team.
A good Louisiana team, but not a Power 5 Louisiana team.
Yeah.
Beat Arkansas 40, lose to Arkansas 40-21 in a blowout, which was again an SEC team, which then
Hmm.
benched Hudson Card. So they lost to an SEC team similar to this year, but again closer than last year. But Alabama was playing a bad game. Blowout Rice 58-0. Okay,
Hmm.
again not. But then that last year they actually beat Texas Tech 70-35. They actually lost to Texas Tech
Yep.
this year. But to be fair, Texas Tech is better, so maybe not the most fair comparison. Then they beat TCU 32-27. So they go into Red River 4-1. Then they lose to Oklahoma State, drop down to 4-2. Lose to Oklahoma State 4-3. Lose to Baylor 4-4. Lose to Iowa State
Hmm.
4-5. Lose to Kansas 4-6. Lose to West Virginia 4-7. And then lose to beat Kansas State, who I think had their starting quarterback. They
Yeah.
had a bunch of injuries or something. I can't remember what it was, but then they beat Kansas State to end off the season at 5-7.
Yeah.
This is starting to look very similar, and actually in some ways worse than last season. And
They've started the bad stuff earlier.
it's coming earlier. Like if
Yeah.
they go through another string of 6 losses, I don't think Sark makes it to the seventh. like or
Yeah.
like we'll have to see. Watch this, folks. Like if they lose to West Virginia this year, not this year. If they lose to West Virginia this weekend, we're putting Sark on the hot seat. He's in the hot seat next week. He is definitely in the hot seat next week, starting next week. So we'll have to see.
Yeah. 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 Stay tuned.
Stay
That's
tuned.
all we can say. Just a reminder on that too. I think I actually characterized it as when I was in Vegas, I cut in front of people in line to bet Texas under 8.5, and I think
Yeah.
that's looking pretty solid right now. Um,
Midway through that Alabama game, it didn't. You're like, oh no. But now you're
yeah,
like, okay, we're good now. We're good now.
yeah, they reverted to form. Club hot seat. We're talking with transportation about seeing if we can send a car for Louisiana coach Michael DeSormo. Not looking good for him so far in year one. It looks like definitely it's year one. I'll put it that way. And Arkansas State Butch Jones. Um, I think he just isn't there because he can't meet the cover charge. Meaning, I don't know if they can afford their buyout as a Sun Belt team, and it's only year two of his contract. So
Yeah,
that's the arrivals and departures in club hot seat.
makes sense.
Okay, you wanna go over your un-Narduzzi? We're not gonna call it anti-Narduzzi because you know what? We love Narduzzi. The guy is just a
Yes,
gem.
he
Only you
is.
can only be anti-Narduzzi if you're like a West Virginia fan and you just hate everything about Pitt. So it's
Yes.
a un-Narduzzi. Who's your un-Narduzzi?
So I'm actually going to give it to Josh Heupel of Tennessee this week. Yes, they didn't cover the spread, but there were moments in that game where they were definitely in danger of losing to Florida. And the thing of it was like when you look at Tennessee, I actually watched a lot of this game. And one note I will say, and again, I find myself weirdly praising Billy Napier a lot whenever I watch Florida games. But honestly, he's like Brandon Staley in the SEC. Like all the stuff like he does really good, and like the times they went for on fourth down. Now to be fair, you have a running quarterback, so that is a little bit of a cheat code on fourth down.
Yep.
But at the same time, though, like the analytics decisions he's making on fourth down are really smart. He like really good, really looking forward long term. Again, if they didn't have Anthony Richardson, and again, you give him a couple years to stack up on some recruits, man, watch out for that Florida team. But anyways, no, I'm giving it. Now let's talk about. Let's go back to the person we're actually giving the award to this week, Josh Heupel. No, I mean the thing is, early on in that game, they were actually trailing in that game. They were actually trailing in that game early on. They actually had to come back and win that game. And what happened was early on they were passing a lot, which is again obviously when you look at their quarterback Hendon Hooker,
Hooker, yeah.
very strong passer. Most of the time he throws for at least two, sometimes even three passing touchdowns in a lot of these games. A lot of like it's mostly a passing attack. It wasn't working in the air. They were getting shut down. So what do they like? And they discovered basically when Hendon Hooker was scrambling, they were getting yards. And then he's like, you know what? Screw it. Just keep running it. We're gonna just keep run. You just keep running the ball, and let's just see how far we can get. And it got them to the win. Like they just kept running the ball, and Florida could not stop them. And it wasn't even like a lot of it wasn't even like designed runs. It was like, okay, cool. Here's a passing play, and then Hendon, you just run right? And he got banged up. He had to go to the injury tent, and he came right back out and kept scoring. Like it was like it's really hard, and you see this a lot with other coaches. Other coaches will stick to the game plan. If it's not working, they're like, well, this is what we do, right? This is our bread and butter. We got to pass. He's like, nope. You know what? Running is working. Let's just switch. Let's switch to running, and it gets you the win. And they could have lost to that Florida team, like as 11-point favorites, they could have lost to that Florida team. But honestly, impressive to change from your game plan on the fly and say, you know what? Yeah, this isn't working. We got to win this game. We're gonna
Hmm.
do it ugly. Although we'd love to throw for 500 yards and run for, and we love to throw for 500 yards and six touchdowns. Let's just run the ball, and if it's going to work, it's going to work, right? And that takes a lot as a coach to be able to stand up and do that. And yeah, that's pretty impressive to me. I'm usually pretty low on Tennessee, but yeah, like I'm very impressed with their performance. That was actually really good and really smart to be able to flip it on its head and get that win there.
Yeah. I one thing I'm gonna be interested to see. I don't disagree with what you say about Heupel. I think he's been way better than I expected, especially in his second year. He kind of took a step back at UCF. I'm going to be very, very interested to see if he's still so aggressive on fourth down, if he gets any improvement from his defense. I think that's playing a role in some of this, where he's just like, I don't know if I'm going to stop these guys ever, so I might as well just go for it and try to sneak a possession here. If that makes sense. So
Hmm.
we'll
Yeah.
see about that. Yeah, but I like what he's doing there. I actually, yeah, that was one of my I was inclined not to bet it at first. Tennessee going over 8, and when I ran the numbers, it's just like this offense is so potent that it's going to be very, very tough for most teams to keep up with them, and they're going to be fun to watch. You know, they play Alabama every year, and they play Georgia every year. So there's two good games. I think they might be able to steal one of those.
They play Bama in so they play
It's usually
no,
like in mid to late
yeah,
October.
they're off this week. They play LSU the week after, which LSU might actually be ranked by then, maybe. And then they play Bama. What's the spread in that game? Bama minus 20.5?
I'd make it less than that.
But it's
I'd I'd
it's
I'd
Bama
put it
though.
like
It's Bama though.
6-17 or so. I know, but yeah, I think Tennessee can just go punch for punch with them.
I think they can too, but I think we're gonna get crazy. Like I think it's gonna be like 10. But we'll have to see. Like,
Wow, that's
well,
really short.
I think okay. Sorry, the fair line should be like 10 or 11. But like I think you're
Yeah,
going to see something like 17 or
yeah,
maybe 20 or because
yeah,
Alabama's going to play Texas A&M I think next week in an ultimate revenge game. So that'll be fun. But that's like I think Texas A&M's already 24-point dogs. So, but yeah, no, it's gonna be interesting. I'm excited to see Bama versus Tennessee. That's gonna be a really good game. Hopefully that'll be a night game.
yeah, yeah. Like that 5 o'clock Eastern or Central, where it's
Yeah, yeah,
just the crowd's just really liquored up and it's super loud and very SEC. SEC at its best.
yeah. And they are home to Bama too, so they're not going to Bama. They get to host them. So
Oh, nice. My Narduzzi, I'm going to throw you some flowers, so I'm going to be very brief with my words here. The Oregon offense looked very well designed and executed, aside from Bo Nix just going to Bo Nix. And I'll keep it at that.
I, I
Good
have
job, Kenny Dillingham.
I have no idea how they won that game. Like I was like I saw like early in the first like that game I felt like was over at the half. Like not like it obviously wasn't over. It wasn't like a blowout. I felt like we had seen everything we were going to see in that game by the half because we had seen Washington State be dominant. We had seen Washington State have good offensive plays, and we saw the Bo Nix pick six. We saw all the and like this is good. This is a game. This is how the game works. This is how the game ends. And it's like we've seen the entire game now. We don't even need to see the rest of the game. But somehow Oregon won, and then somehow
Yes.
Washington State almost didn't cover the spread too, but then thankfully they did cover the spread. So shout out to Washington State for covering the
What a
spread.
kind way to say it. No, we
Yeah,
both had bugs, and we have to say that was like the most backdoor of backdoor covers. Just a
it
meaningless
was.
touchdown with 1 second left, literally.
I mean, I
I,
actually do like Washington State though. Like I actually that team's actually really good, and I want to see Cameron Ward in the future. That kid could also be in the NFL in the future. But yeah, like that team will be like if Cameron Ward like I think he's probably be around next year too. Like that could be a really
yeah,
good team year two with Cameron Ward. But like, yeah, that was a meaningless touchdown that saved our cover there, the +6 there, because randomly Oregon got a pick six too. But
yeah.
Oregon like sneakily up there. They don't play USC in the regular season, but like I think there's a non-zero chance they could end up playing USC in the
In the
in the
conference
conference
championship
championship.
game.
Yeah, if they beat Utah, but like there's like some crazy stuff. Like this is the thing, right? Like I think Oregon won the Mario Cristobal trade.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about it. Yeah,
Yeah, which is crazy because everybody would have been like, "Oh man, Oregon, they're done now. They've lost their like they had really good coach and he's gone now, and they have Bo Nix, which again, they'll probably get a better quarterback eventually than Bo Nix, but like they this is a like this guy is an upgrade somehow. Like no one would have been like, oh yeah, like Oregon would have won that trade. Like no, somehow I think Dan Lanning might be actually an upgrade over Mario Cristobal after the meltdown against. We're gonna talk more about that game later
yeah.
too, but
Well,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. um, yeah. We were just very fortunate. One
yes,
more thing about Oregon: that round robin in the Pacific Northwest is going to be fascinating because those are four good, fun teams that are all very, very capable. Literally, any of those four teams. And Washington State starts down 0-1, but I think literally any of those teams could legitimately have a shot to make the conference title game.
hmm
It's interesting. All right, my rankings for the G5 teams with the best chance of making the New Year's Six Bowl. Number one, Cincinnati. I've had them there all season. No reason to change now. They're looking better and better each week. Number two is if there's a one-loss Sun Belt champ. I might have to put a proviso on that. I think next week we're going to talk a little more about the Sun Belt and who's the best team because that's getting more and more interesting every week. Three, Air Force acquitted themselves nicely. They had that horrible loss to Wyoming. That might have just been like a bad injury game. And I think if they win out, they have a legit shot if Cincinnati fails. And I'm still going to include Tulane. They've got the path, they've got the schedule in front of them. And I still believe in that defense, like we talked about earlier. And you know what's interesting when I was doing this? I noticed that no MAC team has a winning record right now. Back to your point about Maction. Now they've played some tough games. They'd have to do that to pay the bills, but man, they've dug themselves and just they have no shot at this just with the schedules that they've made and they're not there.
5-7 MAC champ Kent State.
It definitely could happen. Yeah. So so that's it. That's it for part one.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will see you guys in part two of the week 5 podcast.